Hello, welcome back to Drink What You Want. I'm your host, John deBary, and today I'm going to show you how to make the hot butter buttered rum. This is one of my favorite hot drinks. It's pretty straightforward in terms of the ingredients. You don't really need to go too far and wide to find what you need. It's probably already in your pantry, but it's got a lot of complexity, a lot of cool techniques and little tips and tricks and lessons along the way. It's not too intimidating, but you'll learn a lot, hopefully. And if you're like me and kind of feeling like winter will never end, this is a very nice, comforting, rich, yummy drink to sip on while you wait for spring to arrive. Now, most traditional hot buttered rum recipes just call for mixing straight rum into a butter and sugar mixture. But for me, I like to overdo things whenever possible. If it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. That's what I say. And so what we're gonna do is infuse the butter with rum. So we have kind of two layers of butter, if you will. And if you're thinking this might be unnecessary, I actually did do taste tests and it makes a huge difference. So it's actually really worth doing it. But if you're in a rush or you just can't be bothered, I'm not gonna arrest you, but I think you should definitely give it a try if you want. Butter infusing into rum is accomplished by melting the butter and then letting it sit with the rum overnight. And what happens is that the alcohol is a solvent. It strips the kind of butter molecules, the flavor, the aromatics, what you love about butter from the butter into the spirit, and then you're left with this really rich, delicious, buttery rum. So first step is just to melt a tablespoon of butter. And then while that's melting, you want to pour out a half bottle of rum, and a half bottle of rum is about 12-ish ounces. 750 ml is 24.5 ounces, something like that. And then you don't need to cook the butter or anything, just make sure it's liquid so that the surface area will incorporate with the liquid. This is another situation where the kind of butter you get matters. I wouldn't skimp on the butter. So find some nice European cultured butter because you're just drinking it really directly. So it's worth it to spend a little extra and get the nice stuff. You just want to combine. Once you have it measured out and melted, and you'll see it's kind of doing an oil and water thing. Give it a whisk. Now that these are they're combined, they live in the refrigerator for at least 8 hours or overnight. So the next step in the process while you're waiting for the buttered rum to happen is to make the butter batter. And this is a mixture of two of my favorite things, butter and sugar, along with nutmeg, cinnamon, black pepper, and vanilla extract. While we're waiting for the butter to melt, we can prepare everything else. A half cup of brown sugar. You don't have to pack it too hard, just roughly a half a cup. And an 1/8 of a teaspoon of black pepper. Then this is a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. And then half teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then just go wild with the nutmeg. I guess you could use a microwave to make this happen faster, but I think it's a little bit more dramatic to do it on the stove. And you don't want to use too high heat because you'll brown the butter, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it just changes the flavor. But for these purposes, just want to make sure it's very liquidy because you're going to be pouring it later into something. So once your butter is totally melted and liquidy, it's now time to add it to the sugar. And then give everything a nice thorough whisk. Make sure everything is fully integrated. Once everything's mixed, you're actually totally ready to use this right away. You fully can, just right into your drink. But for me, we've prepared a large batch of this, so I like to preserve it so I can bust out a serving whenever I like. So what we're gonna do is transfer this to silicone ice cube trays, put them in the freezer so you have little pre-measured lumps to go whenever the mood strikes you. So what you'll need is something you can pour into and a ice cube tray. And also you want to do this quickly while everything is still gooey. Okay, now that you've waited patiently overnight for the rum to infuse with the butter, you transfer it to the freezer for 2 to 3 hours. This will allow the butter to solidify so you can actually physically remove it from the liquid rum. So it wouldn't be a John deBary cocktail video without my trusty gold coffee filter. I think I've had one for pretty much everyone so far. It's really important to have a fine mesh too because the butter particles are going to be very small and pretty soft. So if you have something that's like a wider mesh, it's just gonna fall right through and you're not gonna get what you need. And actually, if you notice usually it happens on bottles of scotch or something where it says not chill filtered. This is actually chill filtration, where you chill down a spirit and the oils in the spirit, they will come out of solution and they will solidify, allowing you to strain them out. So chill filtration sometimes happens with spirits to make them a little bit more neutral or pure or whatever. And this is actually the process, more or less the same process. So fun fact about spirits. And see, your liquid will still be pretty cloudy. You don't want to do like any kind of intense pushing through, just if there's any leftover liquid, just live with that. And if you're curious if the butter actually tastes good, something happens where all the goodness of the butter is ripped away by the rum, and it does not taste good. Even though the leftover butter tastes vile, the good news is that the buttered rum tastes amazing. So that's all you really care about. Set this aside for now and we'll get moving with the rest of the steps. This cocktail requires a lot of patience, I will admit. So after you've waited a couple hours for your butter batter to solidify in the cubes, take it out of the freezer, let it warm up for like a second just so it's easier to work with. And then you can just push out these little nuggets and you are ready to use them right away. Or you can transfer them to a container and keep them in your freezer for as long as you need. It's butter and sugar, like, you know, in the freezer, like this last the apocalypse. But yeah, you have these like yummy little things that, you know, you can't eat if you want, but yeah. It's kind of like fudge. Okay, now we're ready to actually make the drink. So now you've gotten all the hard stuff out of the way and the actual building of the drink itself is ridiculously easy. And the good news is that all of these things you can do in advance up to a week or even more. You have the butter batter lumps either from the freezer, let them warm up a little bit so that they're easy to work with. Next up is 1.5 ounces of the buttered rum. When you're making hot drinks, you want to be careful with the amount of spirits you're using because when you heat up alcohol, it has a lower boiling point than water and the vapors become very intense. Think about like if you have like vodka from the freezer versus just room temperature vodka, it's going to taste more like in your face. Same principle applies here. So just keep that in mind whenever you're building these drinks. And I like to give these a little stir to integrate. So our last step is to bring water to a boil, turn the heat off and let it sort of cool off a little bit. You want to use water that's just under boiling but not actually boiling because you'll burn yourself. And you're topping the 1.5 ounces and ounce of batter with 6 ounces of very hot water. And you can adjust with this too. Like I feel like butter and sugar are like the Barbara Walters filter of cocktails where it just smooths over everything. So if you're adding like more water or less water or like trying out like a different rum or maybe like you're using a different spirit, like the butter and sugar will make everything okay. So you have a lot of forgiveness in this drink, which is one of the reasons why I like it. See, I love this drink because there's just so much complexity and interestingness in it, but like nutmeg, black pepper, rum, like these things are all you can find very easily. So it just requires a bit of ingenuity and obviously some patience because it does take some time, but definitely well worth it. Thank you for joining me again. And I am going to come back next month for a really fun drink. Also a wintry cocktail, but probably more a little bit towards spring and also has some cool flexibility in it. So in order to not miss it, you should hit subscribe, like this video, and then ask me a question in the comments because I do stalk the comments and I will respond to you. So that's a promise.